All right. Well, everybody, I'm here with John Riley from the John Riley Project. Disclaimer here, I was a guest of his about 2 years, probably about 3 years ago. He was kind enough to let me explain my platform. He has a lot of great guests with a lot of great information. And with no further ado, here's John Riley. And, John, if you can please tell me a little bit about your background, what you do, and how you yourself got into podcasting.
Okay, so my name's John Riley. I live in Poway, and I started my podcast in 2018, just interviewing local candidates for office, people running for Poway mayor, city council, school board, and it's been terrific. It's been a really great experience. But my backstory is I'm originally from San Francisco. Came down here to San Diego, went to UCSD, and married, have 2 adult children now, and so it's all good. So the podcasting is how we met. Yep. And thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Now you actually ran for office, I saw. Is that correct?
Yeah, in 2014, I ran for Poway School Board. And I lost, but just by 1%.
Oh, no way.
It was a great experience. And, maybe in my future, I might do it again.
Oh, there you go. Now, are you somebody that kind of registers as a Democrat, Republican, Independent? Do you have a party preference by any chance?
No, I'm an independent.
Okay. Yeah, that's what
And proudly.
Right.
I was raised in a blue collar family. My mom was a Teamster. And so my family was more Democrat, especially being from San Francisco.
Yeah.
But then, you grow up and you learn that there are things you like about each party and things you dislike about each party, and you're never really comfortable in either camp. I'm more comfortable just being myself.
Correct. Yeah.
And so I'm happy to be independent.
Yeah. And I'm the same way. I think that, I don't know, I feel like sometimes my parents' generation, they view their political parties almost like a religion.
Oh, yeah.
And that's sometimes a challenge because even my parents who are they're diehard Democrats, there's a lot of issues they don't agree with the Democrats, but they'll probably never sway from that, and whereas I think more and more people are going independent because they feel neither party really, they have a hard time identifying with one or the other.
Right.
Now, let me ask you something about your background. Who was John Riley growing up? If I went to high school with you, were you the athletic kid? Were you the one who stuck to his books? Who would John be in high school?
I was one of the kids that was, kind of on the college track.
Okay.
Right? I was taking those courses, and I was big time into BMX racing.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So I would travel all over Northern California on weekends. It was just consumed my life. Hanging out at home too.
Yeah. And then, after UCSD, you graduated. What did you do after that?
So, what's interesting is I've been in the sales and marketing, portion of business.
Yeah.
My degree is in mathematics and computer science.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I went into the computer industry, but I was very intrigued by being involved in sales and marketing on that side. So, I've been essentially doing that. And, for the last, maybe 20 years or so, I've had my own marketing agency.
Oh, awesome. Was there ever a point where you thought you were going to go back to the Bay Area? Or were you always like, I just fell in love with San Diego?
Oh, yeah, I did. I mean, when I graduated from college in 87, I moved to LA for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Really didn't like it.
Yeah.
And so I literally got out a piece of paper, like a Ben Franklin list. I made a pros and cons of living back in San Diego or back in San Francisco. And at the time, my wife, who I was dating, she was going to do her internship in San Diego. So that just clinched it for me.
Right, definitely. And how have you seen San Diego change from when you were going to school here, when you decided to settle down, till now?
Well, there's a lot more people, for sure. There's a lot more industry. I just remember when I was younger, there were just very few large companies that were headquartered here.
Yeah.
That's starting to change. I think Qualcomm is a great example that didn't really exist to any significant degree in the 80s.
Right.
I think, I think you talk about politics. I think we've moved politically. This whole area has gone more blue.
Yeah.
Where I think it was probably more red back in the 80s.
Yeah.
But overall, this is still just the greatest place to live, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we pay a lot of money, but it's definitely worth it. It's a little chilly in here in the winter, but not compared to the Midwest or the East Coast at all. And that's one of the things I love about San Diego. And everything's very close. In terms of downtown, the beaches, Little Italy. I mean, you go to the border, you can go to the desert. You can hit the mountains in Julian area. Yeah, and you just can't beat it.
Yeah, you don't realize how good you've got it until you go out of town right. And you're in other parts of the nation, and you're like. Yeah, I want to go back to San Diego.
Yeah, I grew up in LA, and I know there's parts of LA I like, and there's things I liked about it. And it's changed a lot too, but you just can't beat San Diego.
Not at all.
Yeah. Now, if you had to break down the positives, if I were to say, hey, what are the positive changes you've seen, and then what are some of the negative changes you've seen here in the general San Diego area? What would you say?
Good question. Well, I think the revitalization of downtown has been a huge upside. Yeah. God, I remember when we were in the 1980s, you go downtown, it was pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
And now with Petco Park and East Village and the revitalization with Horton Plaza, I mean, it's just a wonderful place to go and visit. And just really the whole coastal community just seems to keep getting better.
Yeah.
Gosh, I was riding my bike one time, and I drove to I bike into Pacific Beach, and then I just rode north into La Jolla. And you take for granted how beautiful La Jolla is, and really enjoyed that. Is there a downside that's gotten worse? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to find bad things. I mean, in San Diego, we were dealing with a lot of challenges that other communities have the same challenges, like the housing crisis, like homelessness. I know our friends down in Imperial Beach are dealing with a lot of, sewage issues there. Yeah. There's a lot of people that are really angry about the growth that's going on in San Diego, especially in my community in Poway. But overall, you can't hate it.
Yeah. What, we talked a little bit about, San Diego was a little bit more of a, conservative, area. And I would probably say, because we do get a lot of military here as well. I don't know if that contributes to it. But lately we have been going very blue, especially like with the city council and the mayor. And, I used to complain, I still complain about the two-party system, but really we almost have just a one-party system now. It's not even, in terms of San Diego, with all the Democrats being voted into office. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel that, from an independent perspective, which I am as well, there's very little representation of somebody who does identify a little bit more conservative or has maybe some conservative views. What are your thoughts on this kind of blue wave that has kind of taken over, at least with the city council of San Diego? Any thoughts on that by any chance?
Well, I think most major cities in America, especially urban cities, tend to be more democratic.
Yeah.
And so I think we've seen that in San Diego. If you roll the clock back to the 80s, San Diego County was like Orange County light.
Okay.
It was still red, maybe not as deep red.
Yeah.
But then I think California in general has shifted to the left. Mm-hmm. And I think it's almost to the point where for many people in California, it's not so much that they want to be Democrats.
Yeah.
It's that they don't want to be Republicans.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing some of those dynamics change. But I think to your point earlier about is it like a single party?
Yeah.
In a way it is.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think the two major parties, as much as they try to present themselves to be different, they are largely the same.
Right.
On a lot of issues.
Yeah.
And so, it is like one party.
Yeah. I haven't been in San Diego as long as you have, but one of the things that's gone just kind of crazy here in California in general is the homeless issue. And it seems like they're not doing much about it. They'll maybe, they'll create 40 beds somewhere when we have 6,000 homeless people.
Yeah.
And they really don't want to take, how should I say it? I don't want to say it's like they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings by, making homelessness a big issue and really attacking it in a way to where, we need to get some of these people off the street. And, I've gone downtown and seen people, defecating on the sidewalks, people walking around with their pants down. I mean, there is a point to where it gets to where, as citizens, we have rights too, where we should be able to take our kids downtown and walk around. We should be able to, if we want to own a business, and not somebody walk around the front of our business or coffee shop with no clothes on. I just feel like we have a right to that. And it just seems like they don't want to, maybe make some tough decisions that maybe a few people might view as unpopular. Do you feel that here in San Diego and California in general?
Yeah, it's such a complex problem,
right.
Homelessness.
Yeah.
And there is no silver bullet to solve the problem because it's so multidimensional.
Yeah.
Is it troubling to have people in tent cities and people, naked in front of cafes?
Right.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
I think any rational person would realize that's a problem. But then, when people talk about some of the potential solutions, well, there's no quick fix.
Right.
And so I just see the homelessness crisis as, you've got to solve multiple things at once.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to solve the housing crisis. You've got addiction issues. You've got mental health issues. You've got PTSD issues that are all playing a role in this. And it's going to take a while to unwind it. Can we expect our government to do something about it?
Right.
There is no easy answer. Do you pick them up and move them somewhere? Well, some people think that's a good idea. Other people think it's inhumane.
Yeah.
Do you build housing for them? That's one angle as well. There's an expense to that. Who pays it? So there's always trade-offs with all of this.
Right.
The problem that I have is, to your point, is that they're not stepping up with a comprehensive solution.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of dancing around the fringes, deflecting. It's not my fault.
Yeah.
And not really getting an answer to a real solution.
Do you know one of the guys that, from San Diego that came out that's very popular is Bill Walton, and just recently kind of, started making making it a bigger issue. Do you think he's going to run for office? And if so, do you think he could win?
Bill Walton, that's horrible. I love him. I love him as a basketball player.
Yeah.
And he's a San Diegan through and through,
yeah.
But I don't see him running for office. No. But he has been outspoken,
mm-hmm.
and there was that proposal to kind of carve out some of that space east of Miramar.
Right.
And I think he was one of the advocates for that, to kind of set up an encampment. But the one thing that I appreciate about him, he was basically telling, Todd Gloria and the leadership, saying, hey, man, we got a real problem. Let's step up and fix this.
Yeah.
And I applaud him for that.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the things too, you have brought up housing as an issue. And I do believe that there's a lot and people are mad at the fact that too many people, and I think even Poway has an issue with this, where they're wanting to build more. And then you have one side that's saying, hey, we want more people. And then you have the other side that's saying, hey, well, we got to build more housing.
Right.
If you want young families to move in, or there's got to be more supply to curb demand. So, what are your thoughts about that in the Poway? Let's just say in the Poway area, for example.
Okay. Well, I'll paint the picture of what's happening in Poway.
Okay.
And then I'll tell you my opinion.
Okay.
Okay. So Poway prides itself as being the city in the country. That's the motto.
Okay.
Okay. And so you kind of have these visions of, people with horses, people with acreage, and that makes a lot of sense. And that's definitely a big part of Poway's history.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a housing crisis, and there's been a lot of property owners that have been wanting to build. But for the longest time, they've been prevented from building. And in fact, Poway passed a provision back in the 80s called Prop FF that basically took about, maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of the territory and said none of this can be converted into higher density housing unless it goes to a public vote.
Mm.
And so then there's a portion of the city where that rule didn't apply, which is along Poway Road.
Yeah.
And now they're building there. And now a lot of people are really upset because generally people don't want change.
Yeah.
ironically, it's the NIMBYs, which we talk about how here's my opinion starting to come through. the NIMBYs, not in my backyard,
Okay.
are the ones that don't want more growth.
Right.
Ironically, they tend to be more progressive.
Right. Yeah.
So they're progressives that resist progress.
Right.
Meanwhile, you have conservatives that you would think would want to conserve the Poway, the city, and the country.
Right.
They're the ones that encourage the development.
Right.
So I'm generally, there's some nuances to every project, but overall, I'm a supporter.
Okay.
For a number of reasons. Number one, I think people have property rights.
Mm-hmm.
If you own property, you should be able to build on it. You should be able to monetize your property. Number two, there's a housing crisis. We have to build more. You talk to any realtor, there's a lack of inventory. That's why prices are so high.
Right.
And if you build, housing at the high end, the middle, the low, all three of those zones will positively relieve pressure somewhere in the market.
Yep.
And I think so building more is good for the housing crisis. I think it's going to dampen pricing, dampen rental pricing. It's going to create more opportunity. It's going to make our economy better because we have people moving here to work for the high-tech companies. Mm-hmm. And then generally, there's certain areas of town that could really use an upgrade.
Right.
And here I was just driving into your community and I see restaurants and cafes and people hanging out on the street, sharing a moment with friends, chatting about things. And it's a more urban environment than what we have in Poway. But what I see, I like. And we don't really have that in our community as much. So I'm hopeful that this is going to change. But this has been a slow progression. Like when I was a student in the 1980s, Mira Mesa was, that was Yuma, Arizona, as far as we were concerned. And you go out there and there was not a lot going on. But as we grow, the suburban areas become more urban, the rural areas become more suburban, and it's just evolution. And a lot of people struggle with change.
Absolutely. A lot of some of the issues I have, or some of the things that, when people bring up the term, since we're on housing, one of the things I want to talk about is what they would deem as affordable housing. Now, when I hear, when I think affordable housing in terms of people being able to afford a home is a great idea, or be able to afford somewhere to live. I think that's, the term I like, but many times where it's really used, it's subsidized housing, and for many, and it's unavailable housing for most of the middle class, meaning that there's a lot, for example, there's, I think they're building some over by Sports Arena, and they're going to be doing some housing over there. But there's a certain amount that has to be affordable housing. And like I said, when I hear affordable, I go, great. That means they're going to be homes that are a place I can afford. But what it really means is, no, you make too much money. You don't have access to those homes. Those are going to be for other people who are low income, which I want to help. But it seems like in the housing planning, a lot of the middle class are getting, priced out or programmed out. What are your thoughts when you hear affordable housing?
I have similar opinion.
Okay.
We all want housing to be affordable. So people obviously rich people will always be able to afford it, but you would hope that middle class people could buy a home. Mm-hmm. You would also hope that people on the lower end would find lesser expensive places to live. Mm-hmm. So when you say affordable housing, it could mean any number of things. It could be taxpayer subsidized. Right. It could be, things like rent control, which kind of plays a role into this. And it could be the mandates that are put on developers to partition off, 10% of the units to be affordable. Right. But they end up just shifting the costs to the other houses, which make them more expensive. Right. So in many ways, all of this is a shell game. Right. In my opinion, the way you make housing more affordable is that you build more. Right. You build more inventory, you create more supply to meet the demand, price goes down. But it's not simply just building more, but we've got to have more density, because then we're going to have more capacity, more units, but a lot of times people resist that. And we're seeing this challenge all throughout San Diego, where you see on the Channel 8 news, there's a guy in his backyard. He looks next door, and someone's building a 2-story out on the other side of his backyard fence, and he's freaking out. But it's that kind of attitude that if we want to prevent that in our neighborhoods, that's just going to further distort the market, and it's going to make things more expensive. So if you already are a homeowner, you love it, but the good news is things are changing, and the good news is the Democrats, which historically have been very anti-housing, very distrustful of the developers, those greedy, profit-seeking developers. They didn't like them, and so they have always been kind of down on more development. Well, the good news is that the Democrats are now actually have a Democrat group called YIMBY.
Oh, really?
Yes, in my backyard.
Okay.
And so these are like pro-growth Democrats, and I'm thinking, hey, all right, now this makes sense to me. But in the end, San Diego is America's finest city. There's always going to be high demand to live here. And if supply doesn't keep up with demand, we're going to always have a housing crisis. And when we have a housing crisis, we're going to have homelessness. When we have a housing crisis, we're going to have a struggle to recruit talent into this community to work in our economy, and it's only going to hurt us down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I had heard you on, I chime into some of your podcasts sometimes.
I know you do. Thank
you. And you did one where you were talking about Sean Elo Rivera was talking about how, housing's a right. And you were also talking about, just in general, how now a lot of people are talking about everything's a right. A right to a cell phone, a right to, everything, a computer, a right to housing. It sounds good. There's certain things that politicians say that sound good, but it's you had a great way of explaining to it, where it's just not. Using the term right is taken away from sometimes the responsibility of being able to, or the process to, either own a home. Or can you elaborate on when you were talking about how politicians are using this term, it is a right to do this or that? Well,
they say housing. You can talk about housing, healthcare, education. It's a right.
Right.
All right. Well, we all agree those are important. We all agree that those are necessary to live a quality life. Okay, so we should have agreement there. But what is a right? What does a right mean? So to me, a right is that you have, as an individual, you have freedom to take action, sort of in a social context. So you have freedom to speak. You have freedom to religion. You have freedom of the press. You can move freely as long as you're not violating someone else's rights. You have the freedom to act.
Right.
So, and I think ultimately we all have a right to our own life. We have a right to live our life, manage our life, to decide who we're going to marry and what careers to pursue and what interests to pursue. We have a right to make decisions about our own life. So that's why I always embrace this notion of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because that is a fundamental thing. And where you as an individual have the right to live, the right to pursue your values, the right to pursue your happiness and make decisions along the way. The challenge is that when you make housing a right, which sounds good, you end up placing a duty on someone else to provide it or to fund it. And then that ends up violating their right. Because if they have a right to their own life, they shouldn't have to be burdened with being responsible for someone else's life. So this is a fundamental difference in how different people see rights. Some people will frame them as negative rights versus positive rights, where negative rights are, that sounds kind of backwards in a way, but think of it as positive rights mean that you have the right to positively take something or acquire something from someone else. Where a negative right puts no such duty on anyone else. And I think ultimately, if you think of it in the context of we have a right to our own life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that means you can't violate those rights. And therefore, if housing is a right, then that means someone needs to build it and pay for it, and you are entitled to it because it's a right. And I think that's wrong.
Right. I agree a lot with you, because I do feel that you should have a right to buy a house.
Yes.
You should have a right to rent a house, seek a house, you have the right to live in basically any community you want. But like you said, the right for somebody else to pay for it and build it and do all that stuff, that's where I draw the line.
Yeah, that's liberty, right?
Right.
So you have the liberty to live where you'd like to live, but you have to pay for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that here in San Diego that's been going up quite a bit is with SDG&E. So if you're not familiar with this, San Diego Gas and Electric, and not just the electric rates, but also now the gas. What are your thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts. Okay, so rates have always been crazy here. I mean, we have paid some of the highest electricity rates in the nation.
Yep.
And then in January, our gas prices went crazy. Okay, so the good news for at least for my family is about 6-7 years ago, we finally got solar.
Right. Yep.
And oh my God, is it great? And so now quite frequently our electric bill is zero. And a lot of times it's essentially negative because we sell the surplus back into the grid.
Right.
And we've kind of got our own little ecosystem because we have 2 electric cars and we power it with the solar. And I love that. I feel like I'm beating the system.
Right.
I feel like I'm winning the game.
Right.
Now, as far as gas goes, the prices spiked. According to SDG&E, the wholesale prices went up. We saw our bill; it was not pleasant.
It was crazy.
It's been so cold.
Yep.
But in the end, a lot of these are the result of policies by political leaders, because there's this big initiative, obviously, to go green, to reduce fossil fuel consumption, and what does that do? That puts pressure on the market to produce less. And when demand is high and they want to produce less, what happens to the prices? It goes up.
Yep.
And then, there's been talk of this ban on gas stoves and all these other things. But all of those things, what they do is they ultimately influence pricing, not just today, but if you look into the crystal ball of the future, pricing is sort of a signal of what's going to happen in the future. And so that's what's happening. And that's why gas prices have been high, natural gas prices.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember, but, I'm in the solar business. So I love to hear when people have great stories about, their solar panels working and how that's going. Because one of the things I always advocate is, solar allows the citizen, the homeowner, to be their own utility company and their own gas company.
Yes.
And then you don't have to be beholden to SDG&E or Chevron or ARCO. And that to me is a big part of the messaging that Democrats don't really go after, because self-sufficiency is something that everybody can identify with. Conservatives, liberals, independents, we all like the idea of having some control over our, owning our own home. There's benefits to that, but also owning your own energy source. And I just feel like that's something that's been not very discussed amongst Democrats. And also, there's a big thing about, are you familiar with the NEM 2.0 with solar switching to NEM 3.0? No. Okay. So you're current. So when you got solar, originally when you got solar, there was what's called NEM 1.0.
Is this net metering?
Net metering. It's a net metering.
Okay.
Originally, it's a net metering 1.0. What that meant was, if you sent back a kilowatt to your utility company, so we'll use SDG&E at this moment, they'll pay you exactly whatever the price is for that kilowatt. So if it's 30 cents, you get a 30-cent credit later on that you can use in the evening. Then we moved over to NEM 2.0 about 6-7 years ago. So you might be on 1 or 2, but NEM 2.0 says the excess energy you send back to the utility company, they have to pay you for it, but whatever they're charging you at that time of the day, because we have what's called what do you call it? Where they charge you different amounts during the middle of the day, and then a different at night.
That's what we have.
Okay, so you might get a 28-cent credit, but that kilowatt's going to charge you, 35 or 40 cents in the evening. Time of use is what they call it. Now, starting in April 13th, for those people who go solar, April 13th, they're going to go to NEM 3.0. Well, where now that kilowatt that they send back, they're only going to get roughly like 9 or 10 cents. So any excess energy now that you're going to be sending back to the grid. Now, this is for new people getting it, not current people who have it. So it's making solar less attractive. Now, this is actually done by the California Utility Commission, which is an appointed commission by the governor of California, which has been predominantly always Democrat. And they oversee SDG&E, PG&E, and Southern California Edison, which is basically like 80% of everybody. And, and I can tell you from my experience, this actually weeds out a lot of, it's still going to be beneficial to go solar, just not as beneficial. People aren't going to save as much money. Solar is always going to be more beneficial for those high-end users, those people who are using a lot of energy, have a pool, 2 air conditioners. They're still going to see a huge difference. But that low-income person who's maybe only spending, $80, $100, maybe 130 when it's really hot, they really conserve their energy. It's not really going to make sense for them to go solar because there's not really going to be a big savings because that excess energy that they were counting on isn't going to be there in the evening. So it's, in my opinion, it's driving out a certain part of the market that could really benefit from it. And I don't know why, for the life of me, why the San Diego Public Utility Commission doesn't see that, and especially when they're appointed by Democrats who are typically pro-green. So I'm hoping that changes one day, but I'm not going to hold my breath. So
well, I have a suspicion.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's these appointed people on the Public Utilities Commission. Mm-hmm. They're lobbied. People will come in there and try to influence them to get them to vote their way. Right. Who has the most financial gain at stake? PG&E, yep. SoCal Edison, and SDG&E. So I would bet money that they're in the back rooms somewhere, mm-hmm. Kind of trying to gain influence, kind of helping people out, scratching people's backs to do this, because ultimately this is all a threat to the utilities and to their profit. All right. So in the end, this is where I find that government involvement in business ends up creating all these distortions that end up harming the little people right. that the politicians claim that they're right. trying to support. Yep. So, but I think there's going to be, this is just my future prediction, I think the solar industry is going to continue to evolve. We're already seeing the evolution with batteries, which mm-hmm. is great. But I think you're going to start to see more like kind of like pop-up portable solar panels and different things that people can do that don't require as much of an infrastructure build on a roof mm-hmm. that, let's say a small-time person with a smaller home might be able to set up a few panels in their backyard, and that might be enough to power their house if they have a modest home. Yeah. So this is all going to keep improving. But in the end, when people generally there's a quasi-monopoly on electricity and gas, and then they come in and distort the prices, and it's not a free market where we can choose. It's these bureaucrats that are dictating it. That's just wrong. Right. So, I'm disappointed. And if you're in the solar industry, it's going to maybe hurt your pocketbook a little bit because you're going to not be able to compete as effectively. Right. Yeah. How do you enjoy your electric car? Now that since we're on this kind of solar, I want to kind of go into electric cars. How do you enjoy having an electric car? I love it. Okay. I'm the biggest fan of it. Yeah. Okay. And just to put this out there, I am not at all like a tree-hugging liberal. Okay. Right. And, people drive electric cars almost as a virtue signal to show that they're saving the planet. That's not me. Yeah. But, that's a bonus, mm-hmm. Helping out the environment it's nice, but it's not my primary. I drive an electric car, number one, because of all the financial incentives. Mm-hmm. when you go and buy a car or lease a car, you're going to get right out of the gate like $7,500 tax credit, or even like a immediate cash credit when you with your down payment from the federal government. You're going to get roughly about $2,500 from the state.
Wow.
Okay. Then when you have an electric car, you get special utility rates with SDG&E for having an EV. When you have an electric car, you go to a lot of places, there's free charging.
Yeah.
Some retailers are putting free charging in front of like the Target in my hometown of Poway, it's free. But even when you're driving up and down like the main freeways in California, and Caltrans is putting them into rest areas and it's free, high-speed charging. And then you get to use the HOV lane on the 15 and it's cheaper. I mean, so it's like there's all these candy handed out. And it's like, this is great.
Right.
And then meanwhile, the other reason I love it is they're just so fun to drive. It's like driving a video game. And so you're always trying to like optimize your efficiency. And so I've taken my car out. I've been driving some version of an electric vehicle for 10 years.
Wow.
Back when it was just a little bit electric and partly hybrid, but now all the way. And so I've driven my car out into the deserts, out into the boonies, and I like to like plot where the charging stations are and make sure I can make it. I have to do it by myself. As my wife came with me, she would like her head would explode. But I love that, the adventureness of it. And then the fact that I'm helping out the environment is great. And the other thing it's kind of fun to do is with liberals that tend to be tree huggers that are always ranting about climate change. I'll ask them, like, what kind of car do you drive? And very few of them drive electric vehicles. And you're like, well, come on, walk the walk. Don't just talk the talk. Sometimes they're just more interested in sort of shaming the Republicans for not believing in the science. But I don't know. I'm a believer that we're going to continue moving in this direction. There's going to be more electric cars. There probably are going to be more alternative fuel cars in the future. I think transportation is going to radically change in the next 10 to 20 years.
It's funny because when I go to like East County, and for those of you who are watching, East County is traditionally a more of a Republican area. There's two things I see when I look up in the sky. I see Trump flags and I see solar panels. And that tells me, two things. It tells me, hey, these Republicans, they'll go solar. Because at the end of the day, if it saves you money and it makes sense, then they're going to make that decision. But that's something I always notice when I go to East County. Is I'll see a Trump flag on somebody's house with solar panels, and I always think that's pretty funny.
Well, there's different layers to that. So on one level, any rational person should be able to do the math and understand that solar is better for their pocketbook. Okay, that minimum. And besides, if you're out in East County, get a lot of sun. Okay. Now, secondly, if you really trace back the roots of Republicans, you go back to Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, they're environmentalists, and you think that they want to conserve, conserve the environment, maybe not as a tree-hugging liberal, but certainly they want to protect, and they want to protect the traditions of what makes America great, right? But what you're finding now when it comes to electric cars, I think, is that a lot of our friends on the right love to like zing arrows at the electric cars. Oh, they catch on fire. Oh, there's a recall. Oh, you can't drive them very far because they're going to run out of energy, and you're going to have to. You're fueling your car with fossil fuels that burn coal to drive the electricity to power your car, and they make excuses. But I think in the end, that's going to change and come around because the cost. That's the other benefit of the electric vehicle. Also, is that not only am I saving on power for the car, but the maintenance is virtually zero. There's like very few moving parts. I don't have to rebuild a carburetor or do a tune-up or rebuild a transmission. They're just so much more efficient. And so I'm sure a lot of Republicans that are driving pickup trucks are kind of, their hair on the back of their neck is standing up, but it's all going in that direction. And the technology is only going to improve. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see Ford F-350 trucks with dualies hauling, an RV behind them, a trailer. and it's all going to be powered by electric.
Yeah.
And it just, the battery technology is still evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. And since we're talking about, driving and cars and everything, Sandag was proposing a mileage tax.
Yeah.
And I believe recently it got shut down. But what were your thoughts on that mileage tax?
Okay, this is another one that's multifaceted.
Yeah.
Okay, so generally speaking, I like the idea that you pay for what you use.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you pay in proportion to what you use. And sort of, kind of, roughly speaking, a gas tax does that.
Right.
But, depending on your mileage of your car, and certainly if you're driving an electric car, then it's not reasonable or fair.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as an electric vehicle driver, I don't pay for gas, but I do pay a higher registration fee. There's you have your regular registration with the state of California, and there's an extra layer. It's like $175 a year.
Okay.
Just for having an electric car. That's still, in my opinion, a good deal. It's
right.
In the end, cheaper than the gas tax.
Yeah.
The challenge that I have with this mileage thing is two parts. Is number one is if they added a mileage, per mile charge, it's not like they're going to take away the gas tax.
Right.
It's going to be on top of it.
Right.
That's a problem. And then the questions of how do you do it? And obviously there's privacy issues if people are going to have GPS things in their car, et cetera. But I think it's not an unreasonable concept.
Mm-hmm.
Because you should only pay for what you use.
Right.
And if you are, a grandma that drives her car to church on Sundays and maybe does 3,000 miles a year,
right.
Then you shouldn't have to pay very much.
Right.
So I don't know, there's a lot of different ways they can do it. I mean, one of the more creative ideas that I thought was just to apply the tax to tires. Because tires are going to wear out over a certain period of time.
Right.
And so in the end, you're kind of paying per mile that
right.
way. Now, it's not perfect because some tires wear out faster than others.
Right.
But if they came up with a solution like that, that would be better rather than having a GPS device in your car.
Right. Yeah, I think also some people would just feel well, maybe if they manage the money better, it would already be there.
Well, yeah, that's the other part of it.
Right.
There is, a couple of things. Number one, there is plenty of money for roads.
Right.
They just spend it on other things.
Right.
Number two is that they want to put in this mileage tax, not to fund more roads, but to fund these trains and all these other alternative, mass transit initiatives. Right. So again, the people are not paying for what they use.
Right.
You're paying for what someone else uses.
Right.
And I don't think that's right.
Right.
This San Diego overall is going to have to come to grips with, as we become more urban, as you have more dense housing, we're going to have essentially a revolution in how we do transportation. Now, Sandag has this vision that, in my opinion, is an old-fashioned vision, a vision of trains and subways. And I'm okay, that's 19th, 20th century technology.
Right.
Now, again, I'm biased. I'm a fan of EVs. I can see the self-driving initiative becoming better and better as the technology improves. So I think what we're going to get to a point is, it's like Wayne Gretzky. You don't skate to where the puck is. You skate to where the puck is going.
Yeah.
And technology is going to a place where we're going to have more self-driving electric vehicles that you'll be able to hail from your house, like you hail an Uber or a taxi, that'll pick you up and take you where you want to go. And it'll be safer because there's no human making mistakes, no human looking at their phone while they're driving, no human drunk driving. And that the technology in these cars are going to be such that they can go independently as pods, or they can connect in a computer-controlled sort of swarm to go efficiently as a group down a freeway. And then individual pods will be able to peel off. And in the end, we'll be able to literally go from where our front door to our destination. Whereas if you are building trolleys,
right.
I mean, I live in Poway. There's no trolley in Poway. There's not even a vision of a trolley in Poway.
Yeah.
So you can't get there from here.
Yeah.
So if I ever wanted to take public transportation from Poway to Pacific Beach, it'd probably be a 4-hour adventure.
Right. Yeah. I went to a Sandag meeting once, and one of the issues that even if you made it happen, there's what's called the last mile, meaning I can get you to your general area. But you're still going to either got to walk, you got to bike, and they're using an example of a mile, but it might be 4 or 5 miles that you got. So I do like the idea of self-driving cars. If you're familiar, I think even I don't know if it's going to be the current Tesla, or you can do it with, or it has to be a newer one they're going to be coming out with, where basically if you own like a Tesla, you go to work, you drive your car to work, and then while you're working, your Tesla's out there Ubering, picking people up, making money. And then, then it comes back to you at the end of the day. And if you need it to come back for lunchtime, you just say, hey, I need it back by this time so it doesn't pick up any trips. And now your car is actually out there making money.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Right.
And then the alternative is true, is that, maybe you just don't need to be burdened with owning a car, and let someone else own it.
Right.
And then you just pay for it as you go.
Yeah.
But this is kind of like Airbnb. It's kind of innovative ways to monetize your assets. And I like that. I think it's outside the box thinking. But I think the one thing everyone should agree is that as the city becomes more dense, becomes more urban, you can't have it where everyone owns a car.
Right.
There's not enough space to put it.
Right.
And there's so many regulations around parking, particularly in multifamily housing.
Yeah.
You have to have so many parking spaces for every number of people as a ratio. Well, that requires more land, and it makes housing more expensive. Again, I think we have to look towards the future.
Yeah.
I think some of our leaders are still hung up, and there's a romantic feeling about trains that it just drives me crazy. I mean, one of the things I'll notice is I'll drive down the freeway and you'll see like the trolley go by the freeway. Look inside the windows and just do a rough estimate of the percentage of that trolley is full.
Right.
It's usually like 15%.
Yeah. I've said that plenty of times. I said, man, I see people on the bus. Sometimes they're full, but there's a lot of times there's 4 people in there, 2 people, I always enjoy having these conversations with you about politics, specifically San Diego issues. A non-political question. What are your thoughts on the Padres coming up?
Oh, I'm so happy. Yeah, I'm really, really excited.
Yeah.
The news broke today that Manny Machado said he was going to opt out.
Oh, really? Yeah. I didn't see it. Okay.
And so Padres Twitter is all in a kerfuffle about this, but you knew he was going to do that because there's so much more money on the table. But I mean, we are blessed to have Peter Seidler as our owner.
Can I step in real quick? When you say opt out, what does that mean? Does that mean he's not going to come back for next season, or is he just not extending his contract? What does that mean?
So he, 4 years ago, 2019, he signed a 10-year deal.
Okay.
$30 million a year, 10 years, $300 million. But he had an opt out after the 5th year, which means that he had the choice that he could opt out of the contract, go out into the open market.
Okay.
Or he could choose to stay in the existing contract for the remaining 5 years for the full 10. And, it just kind of gives him a little bit of leverage because if the market shifts, he's got a little bit of opportunity. And you look around, oh my God, how much these guys are making now.
It's crazy.
Now he could make more. I kind of always figured he was going to opt out. Yeah. But I think in the end, he's going to re-sign in San Diego because we love him here. He loves it here. And I think our ownership is going to do everything in their power to pay him what he's worth. I mean, just look what they're paying all the other guys.
Right.
So I think it's going to work out. But I'm a gigantic baseball fan. I grew up as a San Francisco Giants fan. Yeah. And then when I moved to San Diego, I adopted the Padres and have been living in misery of Padres fandom and all the San Diego sports curse stuff. And it's just we can go on and on. But now they are in a great position, and it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. I really, I grew up in LA, and where I kind of grew up, it's kind of like half Angels, half Dodgers. Because I grew up in LA County, but it's very bumps up to Orange County, and I was like 15 minutes away from Angel Stadium. But I love it when the Padres are doing good because the city's just rocking. Downtown is just. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've been to a few ballparks around the country. I tell you what, Petco Park is one of the best. If not the best, just because of where it's. It's a great stadium. It's hard to find a bad seat. you walk out and you're right in downtown. And like you said, the revitalization has been great. And I loved last season was great. They almost made it, but, couldn't pull it off. But it was great watching it.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
And you go to granted, I'm older, so I just like to watch it on TV. But I'll go to 3 or 4 games a year. And every time I go, I'm always just amazed when you see the people there, because everyone is having such a great time.
Yeah.
And, there's always fans for the other team, especially when the Dodgers are in town, and everyone's so cool. And one thing I think is just so neat is that a lot of young people, that is like the it place to be for a 20-something or early 30s, because it's the happening place. Everyone gets together. They meet their friends. They're going out for drinks before and after. And it just makes San Diego special. It's kind of like when the Chargers were doing really well. Remember, we made the Super Bowl in 95? And man, the whole community just lit up. So San Diegans love a winner. San Diegans want to feel relevant on the sports stage. And now we've got a team. We've only got one team now in terms of pro sports, or let's just say the high end of pro sports. And I think we have an opportunity to win. And I think you got to be excited for that.
Snapdragon Stadium too. I don't know if you've been there yet. Is a great stadium for the Aztecs. That's a great stadium too, and a great addition to the city. So I'm happy for that. Well, John, I appreciate you coming out. It's been a great podcast. I could talk to you forever. So, but thank you for your insight, and maybe next time I'll be on yours again.
Yeah, I'd like that. Okay, well, if I could just kind of leave a couple of thoughts. So my podcast is called The John Riley Project. And you can get information there at johnrileyproject.com. And then I also co-host a sports podcast with Hacksaw Hamilton.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to check that one out now too. Okay.
So we've been doing it for like 6 months.
Okay.
And it's awesome.
Okay.
Because I listen to Hacksaw on the radio for decades, and now he comes to my house and we do a podcast twice a week.
Okay.
So you can go look up Lee Hacksaw Hamilton on, wherever you get your podcasts as well. And if you follow sports, especially San Diego sports, it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you again. I really do appreciate it.
Okay.
And